Maybe you've decided to go on a craft supply spending freeze. You're putting your money towards other things for now, or maybe you're capped out on storage space and it's time to purge instead. But dropping the whole collecting side of the hobby, even just for a bit, kind of feels like a huge bummer. We get used to that shopping high and all the inspiration and excitement that goes right along with it. So, what about those times you're not getting any new supplies? Is it all boring, same old? Or can you get some of that excitement and creativity going? I've got some ideas. So glad you're here. I'm Carrie at Ink Hill Revival, and I'm all about helping you see what you and your stash can do. A craft supply stash goes through phases. Sometimes it grows massively, like, hello, Black Friday sales, and other times, nothing new. It might even be shrinking, but no matter which of those phases you're in, your creative potential and how excited you can get about creating can be exactly the same. It doesn't need to go up and down with supplies coming in or going out. That's because it's not actually the supplies at all that are making us excited or creative. It's whatever we're thinking about the supplies. Like, I can make so many blends now that I've got the latest Distress Oxide color. Or, I cannot wait to use these new layering stencils. Those thoughts are what's making us feel excited and creative, not the ink, not the stencils. So yeah, you can absolutely feel that same creative excitement whether you buy more or make with what you have. It just comes down to what you think about it. Let's say I'm on a spending freeze, but thinking, ugh, I'm so bored of my same old supplies. Well, that's exactly what I'm going to create for myself. All boredom, no excitement. But if I'm thinking, I wonder if I can put some new life into my supplies, that scenario is going to play out totally different. I'm running on curiosity, looking for new ideas, and ready to experiment. I will absolutely find exciting things to do with my supplies. My friend Karen and I are actually doing that very thing today. We've shifted perspectives and are making these videos together to show just how exciting and creative things can get with what you've got. And we're both pulling in some unusual, not even craft supply items from around our homes. So I'm in the middle of a total house purge right now, getting ready to move. But as I've been working away, my brain's still running in the background on that thought, what can I do to make my supplies more exciting? And then I see it. I've got this huge stack of clothes to get rid of. A lot's in good shape to donate, but there's a whole stack headed for the trash. Pants with holes in the knees, super cute baby clothes that's stained, and some of this clothes is even really special to me. Brings up some good memories. This pile of trash clothes plus any of my supplies could be amazing together. Stamps, inks, dyes, markers. I'm super excited to see how this is going to turn out and if it'll even work. But either way, it sounds fun, and every one of my supplies is feeling kind of new and exciting in this light. And you can do the same. Shift that perspective, and you're going to be able to see the new in all your old supplies, and even household junk. But let's dive into 6 different techniques you can do right now with some of your old clothes. You might even start hoping you stain some more things. To start off, I was most excited to find out, could fabric dry emboss texture onto paper? I dug out the very best fabric, a Sharpie stained shirt with lacy sleeves. I tried all sorts of different sandwiches to find which gave the best impression. My favorite combo used my thinner version MFT Stamps embossing mat, and that's about half the width of the Spellbinders version. That embossing sandwich took the main platform, cutting plate, embossing mat, paper, lace, and the other cutting plate. Of course, with all the variables like your die cut machine, embossing mat thickness, and type of fabric, you'll want to test which sandwich works best for you. Just be careful to not force anything too thick through your machine. I finished off this card and most of the others today with all sorts of pieces from my scrap stash, which I reorganized in last week's video and am loving using it now. Next up is die cutting. How well would different types of fabric die cut? I decided to use a floral layering dye and test a bunch out. Things like cotton t-shirts and khaki pants cut so well, but stretchy style fabrics like kids' PJ pants or ribbed clothing took a little more effort to get that clean cut. Running those ones through with a metal shim underneath the cutting plate and then doing 2 passes made it cut great. Now, lining up and gluing these really delicate, flimsy pieces was a little bit of a pain, but it worked. Later on, though, I realized the die cut machine can actually cut through fabric even when it's been adhered to paper. Ultra delicate die cuts, like these leaf stems, fell apart when I cut them, so I just die cut those from cardstock and embossed them with that same lace texture. Now, what about stamping? How would the material handle ink? Is it crisp enough? Will it dry permanent? Now, I had a temporary memory lapse here of all those times I've dropped an ink pad on my lap. Ink does really well staying put on fabric. Some of my pads were a bit dry for this. If you're missing reinkers like me, just load the stamp up as well as you can, and then the key is to press it to the fabric really firmly and hold it for a bit. That kept the stamped image dark and more solid, even with a dry pad. On a few of the fabrics, the ink did sit a little more on the surface instead of fully sinking in, but I just pressed a paper to blot off some of the excess ink. Now, what about using the fabric dimensionally? Instead of gluing it flush to the paper, I'm going to glue some pleats into this skirt and just adhere it at the waist. I love this free-flowing look. It's just this nice touch of realism. Even without a die, this is a simple shape you could cut with scissors and add to any of your people imagery. Or what about curtains or blankets in indoor scenes? Maybe even ocean waves? Lots of dimensional ideas you could tap into. And why not stamp and color on fabric? Texture adds so much to a design, and this is just a very unexpected way to bring some texture in. I stamped with alcohol-friendly ink and colored with my Copics, but water-based markers should work fine too. Coloring on fabric was totally new to me. I needed to use a lighter hand and less ink because the fabric just soaked it up and kind of spread that ink a lot more than it would on paper. But with a little less ink, the spreading was super nice because it made the blending kind of just happen on its own. Another big difference coloring on the fabric came when I die cut. The ink has got to be totally dry before you send it through all that die cut machine pressure. If it's still wet, it's so crazy. The ink squishes out and spreads more from the pressure. And the more pressure, the more it spreads. So if you had your fabric glued down to paper before coloring, you're really gonna want to let that thicker piece dry before cutting. Or just die cut before you color. In the end, that was my favorite method. Glue the fabric on paper, die cut, and then color. What about treating the clothes just like patterned paper? I loved this sweet onesie from my daughter, and it's gonna make this entire card with so little effort. I die cut a rectangle out of fabric, but wanted to add just a little something more. So pulling out the markers again, I'm gonna add some pink cheeks. Now, my marker wasn't quite light enough, so instead I just used a small dot of it and blended it out with the colorless blender. It lightened it perfectly. You've seen me all over the place today with these fabrics. Sometimes using a tape runner, other times glue. Putting the fabric onto paper before cutting, other times after. But all of this experimenting, it's just been part of the whole exciting creative experience. Sometimes having these unknowns is exactly what you need to start thinking about and getting excited about your same old stuff. Now, I just showed you one material to play around with, but Karen's pulled together so many more things you've already got on hand and can get experimenting with. Click right here to see how some household items you might normally avoid make really awesome crafting tools.